It wasn't too long ago that Arsenal went 6 consecutive years without gaining a single point against Manchester City. Now they've just beaten them by 5-1, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at how they did it, including a look at the tactics involved that helped them get this incredible win. Something that was really apparent from the offset was Arsenal's pressing structure, utilising their midfield three to try and overload and pressure Manchester City's backline when they were trying to build from back to front, and they did it through Arsenal's three main midfielders in Rice, Odegaard and Partey, pinning themselves onto, in particular, Manchester City players, allowing them to prevent that progression through the centre of the pitch, forcing Manchester City to continuously be out wide. City almost opted for this because they pushed Nunez and Guardiola so high and wide, allowing for Foden to drift in field, Marmoush to move in field as well, to create City's normal box formation. But it was Arsenal's utilisation of their press and their marking features that allowed for them to get the upper hand earlier on in the game, and it was through Declan Rice pushing himself onto Kovacic, Odegaard pushing himself onto Bernardo Silva, and Partey holding Marmoush. Earlier on, you've got Havertz pressuring Stones and Akanji, along with Trossard and Martinelli, making sure that they're able to really help with that aggressive press. And it was later on down the line that Arsenal really started to find some dividends with this, especially through Rice's aggression onto Kovacic, Trossard pushing onto Akanji, and Havertz making a use of himself between the goalkeeper and the spare Manchester City centre-back. Odegaard onto Silva, allowing him to really jump and push onto the other centre-back, gave Arsenal yet another leg up when it came to these aggressive pressing situations. And very shortly afterwards they started initiating this, they started to gain some success. And this can be seen really clearly for Arsenal's first goal. We've got John Stones in possession right here. Notice Martin Odegaard's position. Originally, he'd be marking onto Bernardo Silva. He decides to jump here and move on to John Stones. Kai Havertz is blocking the pass to the goalkeeper because he's going to press, which leaves Stones with two options. He can either A, go long, or he can B, try to find Akanji here. He tries to go for the latter, but you've got Leandro Trossard right here ready to make that pressing movement. And it all happens within an instance. The Arsenal press is really dynamic. It's really good. You got Declan Rice moving across as well, preventing that pass into Kovacic. He was doing this continuously, and it was through his presence and his pressure that it prevented Manchester City from building up to the centre of the pitch, forcing again them to go out wide. And once you've got the likes of Akanji to pick up the ball, it's then about the pressure that Trossard is able to apply onto Akanji. It's a poor touch, of course, but when he tries to pass it away, Trossard is close enough that enables him to then get a foot on it. He gets that interception, and I want to notice this movement right here. Declan Rice's first touch right here to pass it into Kai Havertz immediately is the thing that really opens this move. If he takes a touch, the City players are able to recover, but the fact that he takes it first time, this movement with the singular foot motion to pass it into Kai Havertz is really, really good. It keeps the tempo high, and it allows for Arsenal to gain that advantage, those quick moments, and once they do that, they're in. Kai Havertz picks his head up, finds Martin Odegaard, and it becomes 1-0. Again, within 5 minutes, it's really, really impressive from Arsenal. Their pressing structure was so good that it caused Man City a lot of problems. And it's that exact same pressing structure that gets Arsenal their second. Look here, you've got Gabriel being really, really aggressive. Remember what I said about the positions of the Arsenal defenders against those Manchester City attackers. So you've got Martin Odegaard onto Bernardo Silva, and you've got Declan Rice really crucially here, so close to Mateo Kovacic. This prevents Kovacic from being able to receive the ball. He doesn't want to go back to Bernardo Silva because the press is going to be so high. And look at the amount of Arsenal players. If I just zoom out, look at the amount of Arsenal players that are in Manchester City's half. But not even that, they're defensive third. It's really good aggression from Arsenal, and it keeps that momentum in their favour, keeping that tempo high. And again, make sure you notice how aggressive Gabriel is in this particular moment onto Phil Foden, and it leaves Phil Foden with an option. He can either go across the pitch to try and pass to Marmoush, which could get intercepted by Thomas Partey, or he could again try and go long. He tries to go for the first pass towards Marmoush, and it gets intercepted by Thomas Partey. But again, look at how aggressive these Arsenal players are. It's so good. And as that pass gets played, Thomas Partey intercepts it pretty brilliantly. You've got Marmoush just out of picture right here, and it allows Arsenal to go on the attack again. But one thing that I've got to mention from a Man City point of view is look at how much space you're giving Thomas Partey. There's no aggression to try and come back against Thomas Partey once the pass gets intercepted. You've got Bernardo Silva, who's currently sat in the middle of what looks like a back three. It's obviously not. But again, he needs to be more aggressive. Kovacic needs to be more aggressive. And that's something that I would say about this Man City side, in particular in this game. They were so passive. And Arsenal took that momentum. They took the initiative continuously. Thomas Partey essentially being asked to shoot. He takes that request. It gets deflected off of John Stones. But one thing that Man City need to take from this is the amount of passive play they have throughout this. And the way that Arsenal dominated them due to this. You've got to pass over towards the right-hand side. You can try and play a pass into the centre if you want to, or you can try and recycle. But look at the amount of space that's available. It is nigh on criminal. But again, it was Arsenal's great pressing structure, their tenacity, their aggression that got them into this position in the first place. And Thomas Partey gets a fortunate deflection, but I think Arsenal deserve it for all of their great work. Once Arsenal's second goes in, things start to fall apart for Manchester City pretty quickly, and that's from a defensive point of view. Their midfield balance just isn't quite there defensively, and from a back four point of view, they're far too spread and far too easy to play against. Let me try and show you what I'm talking about. So, you've got Declan Rice on the ball currently, and he's going to be playing a pass into Miles Lewis-Skelly, but before we look at that, and before we take that into consideration, we need to just note where this Manchester City back line is. Now, typically you look at Arsenal when you're playing in these games and they're really nice and compact, and we'll look at that in just a moment later on down the line. But what I want to talk about is the lack of compactness from this Man City back line. I mean, they're so open. You've got an option for an Arsenal player at the back post. You've got acres of space for Arsenal players to run in beyond this area. You've got another chance here, and it's just so easy. And then you look at Manchester City's defensive midfielders. I use that term very lightly, but here's one, and here's two. Look at the space. Now, any side that has a defensive midfield pairing that is that spread and a back four that is that spread, you're never going to be able to get there, especially with the lack of aggression and the passive nature that Manchester City have. And Arsenal utilised this to their advantage pretty brilliantly. They really took advantage of this situation in this scenario. Declan Rice plays the ball into Miles Lewis-Skelly, who is aware of the amount of space that he has to not only receive the pass, but then be able to turn. And as he receives this pass, he's able to then turn and move into the box. Bernardo Silva can't be aggressive enough. You've got Marmoush, who's not aggressive enough either. And it's just so easy for Arsenal to pick the ball up, use their athleticism, use their initiative, and drive against the heart of this Manchester City back line. And as he drives through, he cuts inside onto his right foot. Again, he needs to be a little bit, this Man City side, needs to be a little bit more aggressive. They need to be a little bit more forthright. They, unfortunately for themselves, not. Miles Lewis-Skelly takes a shot. It just gets saved by Ortega. It's a decent enough save, but unfortunately it goes into the back of the net, and Arsenal are 3-1 up. Again, utilising that really good aggressive nature, but capitalising on the poor passive play of this Manchester City defensive line. But it's important to note that Manchester City were in this game and they did have a game plan of their own, but Arsenal were able to counter it to a pretty brilliant effect. So first of all, let's try and talk about what Man City wanted to do. The idea was fairly simple, having a midfield two that then allowed one of them to go forwards and take up a more attacking midfield slot. Wide play from the two fullbacks in the likes of Guardiola and Matheus Nunes allowed for Manchester City to hold their width. In adding that extra centre midfield player into an attacking area, you're looking to overload this situation here with Rice and Partey. Hopefully that the three Manchester City midfielders can overload the two Arsenal midfielders and then gain a momentous advantage to then push through that centre Arsenal line. The problem that they had was Arsenal's defensive shape, and I mentioned that a little bit earlier. What you had was Arsenal's back four, their midfield four, be really nice and compact. This isn't something new that Arsenal have done, but the way they were able to make themselves super defensively resolute meant that whenever Manchester City tried to push the ball into these midfield channels here and here, they were always smothered with the Arsenal players' aggression and their tenacity and willingness to try and win the ball back. This is also capitalised upon by the likes of Martin Odegaard and Kai Havertz, who had very good aggressive defensive work rates to be able to help with the pressure onto these Manchester City players looking to progress the ball forwards. The result was Man City essentially passing out wide and then forcing those same players to recycle backwards, meaning that City didn't really have too much potency going through the centre, and whenever they went out wide, they weren't comfortable enough to try and cross the ball into Erling Haaland and try to get a goal. The one time they did, it ended up being a goal, but Arsenal managed to maintain their defensive security and then utilise that to then progress forwards. City, in their desperation, tried to move Guardiola further up, Savinho in field, allowing for a greater midfield presence in the centre. The problem with this was that when John Stones and Akanji split, if City were to lose the ball, it meant that Arsenal were able to counter-attack. And you've got the likes of Martinelli utilising his pace, Havertz, Martin Odegaard, and Leandro Trossard to be able to take those opportunities against City's two defensive players. This allowed for Arsenal to gain a huge momentous advantage and capitalise on the space that Man City left. It was pretty brilliant. And that is exactly what happened for Arsenal's fourth goal. So you've got Manchester City on the ball currently. But let's take a look at their aggressive attacking shape. You've got Guardiola here on the left-hand side. Remember, this is your left back. And you've got Mateus Nunes out here. Remember, this is your right back. So you've got left back and right back. Now, the problem with this is if you lose the ball, these are where your defensive players are. But let's also take note of where the attacking players are. So you've got 1, 2, 3. And arguably 4 once Kevin De Bruyne moves a little bit higher. It's so many players to try and overload the centre of Arsenal. But the problem that they've got is how compact Arsenal are. Look at this. Look at how compact this defence is. Trossard's dropped back to try and deal with Mateus Nunes, and it means that Arsenal's back four. Let's just remember what Man City's back four looked like. Remember how spread they were? Mateus Nunes far out on the touchline, and then you've got the spreading and space between him and John Stones, or him and Akanji. Look at Arsenal. This is your right back. This is your left back. And it means that there's not enough space. The second thing we need to note is Arsenal's midfield line. Note where Declan Rice is. Note where Thomas Partey is. The space in between the defensive line and the midfield line is so compact that it would be nigh on impossible for any Manchester City player to be able to get the ball without being pressured almost instantly. Then we need to look at Arsenal's attacking line. Look at where Odegaard and Havertz are, and the space between, or the distance between Arsenal's defensive line and Arsenal's attacking line. It's so compact. They're so narrow. And it means that City essentially cannot penetrate through the centre of Arsenal, forcing them out wide. And it's once they tried to force it that Arsenal got their turnover. And once they got their turnover, it was then about springing that counter-attack trap, utilising Martinelli, utilising Kai Havertz to try and go forwards. Thomas Partey plays a brilliant pass into Martinelli, and all of a sudden, Arsenal are away. And now they have a 2v2 situation. You've got Akanji and John Stones against Havertz and Martinelli, and they drive forwards. As they drive forwards, just look at this amount of space. It's acres. So much space to try and exploit. As they drive forwards, you've got an overlapping run of Kai Havertz. Martinelli plays him in pretty brilliantly. It allows Havertz to cut back inside onto his left foot and fire home once again to brilliant effect. And that puts Arsenal 4-1 up. It's pretty easy at this point. Arsenal's fifth and final goal, thankfully for Manchester City, came from Ethan Nwaneri, a brilliant young prospect coming through the Arsenal Academy. It stems from a brilliant crossfield pass from Declan Rice. It goes through over to Nwaneri, and while there isn't too much to analyse here, just note the positioning of Bernardo Silva. I find this really strange, the fact that Manchester City defensive midfielders or midfielders in general drop in to be something or look something of a back five. Again, it's obviously not, but they do it quite often. I find it quite strange, leaving Kovacic essentially to either mark Sterling or then to go forwards to try and press forwards onto those Arsenal midfielders. It's a bit odd. Nwaneri cuts inside and takes a brilliant shot, but again, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Manchester City players who are unable to apply enough pressure onto him to either block a shot or to make sure that he's not able to create a moment from this situation. It's a bit crazy. The next thing I want to look at, or the final thing that I want to look at, is not necessarily too much of a critique, but the movement of Ortega here, because he doesn't dive, and I'm sure it's a fantastic shot, and I'm not taking anything away from Nwaneri. It's a brilliant shot, but he doesn't even attempt to dive, and I find that a little strange. If any Manchester City fans are watching this, let me know what you think about this. Maybe it's too good, maybe it's too good of a shot, but I just thought that was a little bit odd. Arsenal were absolutely fantastic and completely outclassed Manchester City for a good while in this game, and they could have been a couple more goals ahead had they taken and converted their chances. Even at the end, it seemed quite straightforward and quite easy for them. They finally get their monumental win, beating Manchester City by 5-1. They were superb. But of course, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.